Sex workers on Reddit, what's your approach for special cases of clients, like obviously depressed, sad, sick individuals etc.? What was the most unfortunate case you've ever encountered and how did it affect you? When I was a pro-dom I saw all sorts of really sick people and was a therapist almost as often as a sex worker, but one guy in particular stood out. He was a cute guy in his 20s, a bit shy and nerdy, and his kink was getting repeatedly kicked in the balls as hard as possible. He begged me to sterilize him, which put me in such a difficult position. I wound up kicking him a few times. He came on the impact of one of the kicks, and then he started sobbing into my arms telling me that he didn't want to be sterile. I tried to talk to him to understand his fetish and see if there was a safer way to channel it, but I couldn't fully get through to him. It stood out because unlike a lot of other people I saw, I could tell he was really struggling with his fetish and was truly afraid of the consequences. When I was 18, I was a phone entertainer, phone sex operator. There was one older gentleman who called every Monday without fail. His wife had passed away and they'd never had any children, so he was extremely lonely. He just wanted to talk to someone. I had the option of giving people free minutes up to 1 hour per month, so he got all the minutes I could give. We talked, literally just talked about life for about half an hour each week. He just wanted someone to talk to and share his life with. He passed away about a year after I started. I never got last names, but our dispatchers did, so when he didn't call 1 week, I messaged one of the dispatchers to see if she could find anything on him. I got a link to his obituary that day. Turns out, he was just an hour away. I went to that man's funeral and just broke down. His sister was there, and I guess seeing a 19-year-old girl crying like she'd lost everything got to her. I explained what he'd meant to me. I was in an abusive relationship at that time and he was the closest thing I had to a friend, and how much I would miss the talks we had. She ended up giving me his favorite Carhartt jacket after our talk. I still use it every winter and think about how it felt to talk to him. I'm so grateful for the time I had to know him and I miss him so much. If it weren't for him, I would still be in that relationship, but he gave me the strength and advice I needed to leave. Rip Hooley. I miss you and still have a glass of Johnny Black every year for your birthday. Veterans coming home from tour will be out with their boys celebrating, and in a split second a lap dance will go from sexy to holding them while they cry. I think the physically close nature of a lap dance that resembles being held triggers something. Especially if an emotional barrier is down due to drinking. My approach is to let them be there as long as they need to be or until my bosses kick us out. It breaks my heart because there isn't anything more I can do. I want to tell them they can come back and cry as often as they want to and they're safe there, but I think the feelings are just so large that they want to avoid ever encountering them altogether. Only 2 have come back and only one of those 2 utilized it as a safe space. I work in a sex club and we have a program for mentally and physically disabled people who are getting money from the government to come to us. The most special one was with a man who was mentally and physically disabled and couldn't speak, so he could only let me know if he liked something with his eyes. 1 time means yes and 2 times means no. You need to take a lot of time and have patience with them. To me it's a big pressure to make it an amazing time for them, and I always try my hardest so they can enjoy it. I always give them a little extra time because they only get in once every few months or so. I worked as a male escort on the side for about 2 years to earn some extra income while trying to get a job in another state. No, we don't get lonely housewives and other exotic fancy. I did primarily stripping at parties and very little actual sex. One of my very rare occasions where I was hired for an actual intercourse session was probably one of most interesting times of my life though, and ended up being my last for years. It was a friend of someone I did a party for. The actual client wasn't at the party. Anyway, she was one of those extremely shy introvert girls. A little overweight, kissless virgin who threw her all into her career rather than dating throughout her early 20s. She was nearing 30 and I originally thought, according to her friend, that she just wanted to get the virginity thing out of the way. I get to her apartment. There are anime dude posters and I brought up that I used to watch that stuff back in high school. Apparently she was obsessed with shoujo anime. I didn't actually know what that was since I hadn't really followed any of this since Bleach was a thing. We got to talking about anime and Japan in general and all about her favorite genre. She admits she was just going along with her friend on this whole escort thing. I've had that response before, and most of the time it's just a defensive excuse like, haha, I'd never hire someone, I'm just doing it to make my friends shut up lol, but this one actually felt 100% genuine. Something about this was just way more interesting to me, so instead of strip tease, foreplay, a whole bunch of licking, and maybe intercourse like usual with these one-on-one clients, I went ahead and offered to go out to dinner first. Something I've only done maybe 3 times, usually with the really nervous girls, but this time I was genuinely curious. It was awesome to say the least. Once she had a few drinks in her, she wouldn't shut up and I just let her lay into me with all sorts of anime, Japan, travel, even furry stuff. I felt like a high schooler again, but instead of characters going demon form and slicing each other up, it was all this surprisingly interesting romance stories and crazy things I didn't even know existed. Dinner ended, we split the bill, and hopped in the car. On the way back the dam just broke. She completely lost it emotionally. All those lonely years came welling up. Constantly surrounded by these wild romance anime she watches and manga she reads. We get back to her place and just hung out and talked for a while. The idea of it being a session with a client went out the window at that point. We went on a walk around her block, swapped numbers, and called it a night. We dated for about 6 months after that until I finally got the job offer I had been dying for 6 states away. It was a clean breakup. We still chat online sometimes. Her transformation over those months was incredible. She lost weight and we regularly went on bike rides to help. She did end up losing her V card about 2 weeks in. I don't think she was ever the one, but it was probably one of the most positive relationships I had over the years. I also realized that I broke all the escort rules here, but I wasn't ever serious about it. I don't think you even can be as a guy doing it. I also stopped with her outside of 1 or 2 in the city I'm at now just for fun. I once got a call from a guy asking if my place was handicap accessible. I said yes and he showed up. I opened the door and he wheels in and I ask how he'd like to do it or what he was interested in. Turns out he was paralyzed from the waist down. He said he really enjoyed kissing to start, but that any kind of nipple play drove him crazy. I legit spent an hour sucking and biting this guy's nipples and it drove him crazy. I made my rate with no actual penetration and he seemed so very pleased to find someone willing to just suck on his nipples. Best appointment ever. I've also had a guy that messaged me saying he wanted to get to know me. This usually means he wants to bone for free and is trying to play my emotions to achieve this. But this guy was really just a lonely dude that worked too much and didn't have time for romance. I went to his place and just laid on his bed and talked for the entire time. I ended up doing this several times and felt really good about being able to be the someone he could just sit and talk to. Eventually he wanted it to go sexual, which was fine, but then he started cheaping out on me because we're friends. Nah bruh, I still gotta pay my bills. But initially it was very sweet. I once had a very sweet young man come to me wanting to lose his virginity. In talking to him, it became clear that he had severe social anxiety and likely some other mental health problems. He had never kissed anyone romantically or gone on a date. He was an immigrant who had never received any sex education from his school or parents. He also didn't have any friends. I felt so sad for him. I told him that I didn't think it was a good idea for his first time having sex to be with someone he just met. I suggested that we just try kissing. He had never seen a vulva before, so I gave a little anatomy lesson. Then I very gently told him that he would probably benefit more from seeing a therapist than an escort at this point in time. Therapy isn't something normal in his culture, so I had to do some convincing. I told him that if he went to therapy for a few months and still wanted to have sex with me, I would do it. He trusted me, and he went to therapy. Several months later he emailed me and thanked me. He had found a good therapist and was starting to make friends. He was hopeful about finding a girlfriend one day, and had decided he wanted his first time to be special with someone he loved. I couldn't have been happier to lose a client. ETA, I'm getting a lot of comments that this story must be fake. I'm sorry you're so pessimistic that you can't believe that on one occasion, one person cared about another person. I'm not a saint. I've done plenty of terrible things in my life. But I've also done some good things. I hope you have too, and if you haven't, it's never too late to start. And yes, I still charged him. I charged for my time, not any particular sex act. My rate at the time was somewhere around $300 to $400 per hour. He felt he got more than his money's worth. After our only session, instead of paying $300 to keep seeing me for sex once in a while indefinitely, he paid a therapist for a little while to help him with his problems, and now likely gets to have sex for free. I was a paseo. I had a man in charge of a major charity organization that desired being degraded and humiliated. He was in this high position of power, looked at as an influential and important man. He was able to change people's fates in a minute, and he would call me for me to reduce him to absolute nothingness. The shift in power from his straight life to his secret life was major. I'll never forget that even the most incredibly powerful people need to relinquish control and give up the reins to others. Edited to add paseo equals phone sex operator. Don't know if this counts, but my late cousin was in a wheelchair his whole life and lost almost all ability to speak and hear, but understood his situation. He would always ask, "Why can't I have sex, have a GF?" 2 years before he died, my uncles got him a sex worker who was super cool about the whole thing and had sex with him a few times. He got to die experiencing sex at 28. That woman is our hero. There was one young man from Russia. He kept asking me about my mom and if I thought I was saved, if I was a Christian. Not as weird as it sounds considering I had made some comments on my public media about it. I met him once for a meet and greet and then once more in person. He had admitted he was a virgin and talked about seeing other providers but not consummating anything. We got to a point where we were almost there and I stopped us. The look on his face, despite him saying yes several times, told me he was going to regret it later. We ended up cuddling some, but I never heard from him again after he left. I just knew that I didn't want to be the person he looked back on as an empty connection. Thanks for watching our video. If you like it, please smash the subscribe and like button to support the channel, so that we can create more quality content in the future.